All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Want to welcome everyone to today's session. Today we'll be talking about end of year maintenance for the Stratum application. We'll go over the steps that you'll need to consider in order to get your Stratum application ready for the new year. So what you'll need to do is, well, we'll talk about these in more detail, but go over the categories of data that you're currently loading into the application. Each one of those categories will have a calendar associated to it. Um, and we want to make sure that those calendars are updated, for the new year, that they include 2025 and beyond if you need additional tables. Um, we'll be building uh, both import and view calendars. So we'll talk a little bit about what those are and where to find them, um, how to build them out. We'll go into the tables. You want to make sure that Stratum stores all the tables by year, so we got to make sure that the new tables get created for your actual sales, open orders, whatever categories that you're currently loading into Stratum. Um, Creating planner table indexes, we probably won't talk too much about, only because this is something that is not normally the case for most of our customers now any longer, because of the web client interface is now the primary interface. So not as important. Um, and then certainly don't want to miss adding and making sure that that year is selected within the connector software as well. That will bring the new year into the web interface for you. So we're going to go through each and every one of these in more detail. I've got some examples set up for you. So we're going to review those. Um, so categories, right? So currently I am in the Stratum administrative interface. So this is the Stratum administration. This is part of the planner program group, by the way. Um, And so if you go into this interface, you'll see there's different areas that you'll go into to manage your calendars and your categories. I guess the first thing you can do is go into File Data Source. This will highlight each one of the different categories or data sources, kind of synonymous. But as we can see, here's sales. We can see that sales is a daily structure. And if we click on the data source tables, we can see the tables that are already created for sales. And as you can see, I've got data tables out to 2030, right? Um, and we'll go into those and see how to build those out. But this is one way to figure out, what tables you have, what different data sources. Now, if you have Stratum, you're going to have a lot of these, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you're loading each and every one. But this will at least give you an idea of the structure, the date, what view group or time structure it's associated to. And then if you go into the tables, you can actually see which ones are, what years have been created already. Um, so that's definitely a way to figure out what you're doing and where you're loading data. So definitely, want to check that file data sources to check that out. So as we can see, actual sales, for instance, will kind of run a little bit with that. We'll also look at maybe forecast. Everything seems to be daily in this particular example, so it is what it is. You may not have that. You might have monthly structures. So, but this again, file data sources are a great way to figure that out. So we know it's a daily structure. So now we can start looking at our calendars. So one thing we want to do is go into data views, view sets. And if you go into data view sets, you can see all the different view sets that are built out for you within Stratum. And you want to go into year. So when you highlight year, and then you click on view items, you'll see all the different years that have been created. Okay. And we can see everything's created out to 2030 for this particular environment. If we need to add a new year, you just simply go to the bottom, click on add, and then type in your new year as needed. And then want to make sure that, that coincides with the year that you're typing in. And then you'll save that. Once you close that out, click on save, and then you'll have that new year available to you. So uh, again, data views, view sets, and then you highlight year, go into view items, and you want to make sure that you have the ample, sufficient number of years created. And yet you might have years going beyond, 24, 25, right? Uh, if you want open orders, depending on the nature of your business, um, you might have open orders going out 6 months to year, 2 years, for that matter. I've seen it happen. So definitely something you want to accommodate, look for here to make sure that you have the absolute number of years that you need to build out. Well, another thing to consider is to build them all out. Build out 5 to 10 years, and that way you don't necessarily have to deal with this. But just make sure that obviously down the road that someone is uh, aware, that this is something that needs to be done. Of course, we'll help you with that. So first things first, creating that new year or new years, and then saving that here would basically, I'm not going to save it, by the way, and that will allow you to go in and do the mappings. So now that we've created the new year, we need to then go into our view groups, and we can see that daily is our only view group here, but you might have other view groups in your environment like monthly, weekly. So you'll definitely need to go into those view groups as well to manage those. We can see that our daily view group has all those different view sets associated and combined into the daily view group. And so we'll need to make sure that all of those are mapped for the new year. If we go into view buckets, then we can see that here's all the years that we just saw within the last prior screen, right? So if we go into 2030, we can see that 2030, it's already mapped for all the days. So as you can see, all of our days are built out to 365. So we know that 2030 is not a leap year. Actually, this year is a leap year. So if we look at 24, or 28 for that matter, 28 will be another leap year. So we should have February 29th mapped, and indeed we do. If we look at a non-leap year, which would be like 27, we can see that February 29th is skipped. See how that's not mapped? It's got 0 in it for the bucket number, and then the default date of January 1st, 1980. Basically telling the product, ignore this date. This is a non-leap year. So this is one of the bigger gotchas, right? You want to make sure that you accommodate leap year, the leap years, if you're creating a leap year. It's every 4 years, 24, 28, 32, and so on and so forth. There's an extra day in the year, February 29th. So make sure you accommodate that. And then you want to also back to just 2030. We can see that the month. So once you map your days, you should be able to build your other view set items off your map days. Like for instance, months. We can see that we've chosen days to use days instead of buckets to do the mappings. We can see that days is based on the buckets. So it's the days really that's got that one-to-one match to the bucket for each day. And then the months will use the days, which is already mapped, to create our months. Does that make sense? It's easier. It's way easier this way. Same for the quarters. Now that we have months mapped, now we can build our quarters off the months. Again, easy. Weeks, we're using buckets because you might have a specific way to do the weeks. Typically, what we do here is we do like the partial week first. For instance, if we look at all the way out to 2030, we can see that for January of 2030, One through five is, that's what we call a partial week. So that's what that first, I did not mean to change that. That's should be 10101. See, as you can see, if you're not careful, you can make some mistakes. So again, January 1, January 5th, partial week. Make sure that those are jiving as well. And then 6 through 12 is a full week. So your full weeks, will consume most of these. And then you might have another partial week at the end of the year as well. So you want to make sure you accommodate that there. Okay. So this is the, again, the necessary, menu to go in. Make sure that you map your buckets to the appropriate view sets, and make sure that this menu is appropriately filled out. Then you click on complete and you save it to make sure that all your work is saved. We do provide a service. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, we can do it for you. So you can feel free to contact me, and it's a few hours of services to help you get that done. So that's another thing that we provide. So that's your, this is what we call a view calendar. So this is the view calendar structure is definitely something that you have to build out and make sure that you have the New Year's mapped accordingly. How are we doing on? Uh, Feel free to use chat if you're wanting to ask any questions. Unfortunately I'm in a server, uh, so I'll definitely make sure to check questions, in a second here. So that's your view calendar. Your import calendar is going to be found under Utilities, Import Calendar. And depending on how you load the data is going to depend on whether you use these or not. In my environment, we have import calendars for all of our years so that we know that the data is coming in and we can tell it how to deal with the buckets. So if we look at 2030, we can see that we've got 365 buckets all the way out to 12/31 of 2030, essentially. So the import calendar is essentially used to help the import when you're loading data into Stratum. This helps assign the buckets, the dates to the bucket numbers. So again, this is something that you'll need to make sure that you're doing. You can go into all your different categories, and if you don't see a year and a bucket number, you're probably not using the import calendar. You're probably passing the bucket number instead. So if you don't see any import calendars and your application is fine, you're obviously serving up data to the users, that would tell you that you're not really using the import calendar. So don't fret it. But if you do go in here, for instance, actual sales, and you might see, these years created out to, 2024, but you don't see anything beyond, well, that's a tell sign that, indeed that you are using the import calendar and that you probably should build out those new years. Okay. If we wanted to build out a new year, say for 2031, I would place my cursor here on the bottom and click on new, and then type in my new year, which would be 2031. It'll then revert you over here to the starting date, which will then be January. In most cases, it'll be the first year of that, the first day of the year for 2031. And then I'll click on generate, and it will generate out my calendar for that year. And then you save it. Pretty simple. It's actually easier than the prior menu that we went through for the view calendar. If we do it for 2032, we'll just tease this out a little bit. We can see that 2032 being a leap year, it'll automatically accommodate that. So we can see at the bottom that 366 is our bucket number, which is right, meaning that February the 29th has been included as a bucket for leap year. So interestingly enough, the import calendar already knows that it's a leap year. So, but in the view calendar, it doesn't. You have to tell it to skip it. So that's one of the gotchas there you want to keep your eye on for view calendar versus import calendar. Okay. So make sure that you go through these and that you go through all your structures and make sure that you're ready, for the new year's. And then you save these calendars as needed. Okay. So that's your view calendar, that's your import calendar, and now we want to make sure that the tables are created. So we'll need to go into a different menu for that. And again, this would be part of your planner view group. So Stratum planner, and we can see that. So there's the admin, and then we also need to go into database install, and this will allow us to. Um, we'll just use a trusted connection for that to create the tables. So here's now where we need to check to make sure that we have tables created for the years that we need. So now, pivoting from calendars over to tables. So here we can go into our structures. Again, this should be the same structures that we saw before. And we can see, for instance, actual sales, daily, 366 buckets. And then it also shows you all the dimensions that are associated to that structure. So really nothing to do here, but just more informational. And then we'll go into define tables, for instance, actual sales, and we can see all of our tables for actual sales here that have already been created. And as we can see, like we saw before, everything's been created up to 2030. So if I wanted to create 2031 tables, I would come in here, type in 2031, and click on perform, and it will then define. It doesn't necessarily create the table yet, but it defines the 2031 table structure for actual sales. So, and then so on and so forth. If I wanted to do 2032, 2033, you would just simply type those in and click on perform to define the table for that structure. Okay. You haven't created it yet, but you defined it. So you'll do that for each one of your structures that you want to create tables for the new year. All right. Definitely don't want to forget that step. And then once you have those tables defined, that's right, you'll go in and create them. So yet another step to come in. And I like this is another menu that you can assess of whether you're loading data into these different structures. And I'll show you here in a second. It's actually looking at my actual sales tables, and it will tell me which tables have data in them, which is very informative. So here it is. We can see the return on actual sales. And I've got data going in my tables all the way out to 2023 through 24, right? This is a demo environment. So typically what you'll see is, the entire history will be red, indicating that there's data in those tables. But I do see that my tables going forward for sales, well, they're empty, and that's fine. That's not a big deal. Your new tables will appear here in black as well because they're empty too. They're defined, but they are empty. So here, what you want to do is just simply highlight the structure. Certainly, you can survey, the tables to see what's going on in terms of the new tables, which will appear down here. There's my 2031 table, by the way, and there's the header and the detail table. So there's two different sets of tables that will get created for each year, the header and the detail. As a matter of fact, if you look at the nomenclature of the table, we can see that actual sales AS 999 is the DSL number. That's just the table number. The year is 31. And then the header is 1 and the detail is 2. Okay. So you'll see the new tables show up as such. How do we create them? Well, you just click on create tables. It'll then go through a script, and don't worry, the tables that have data in them will be ignored. So not to worry there. I got a little dialogue failure. Just you can close that out. You should not see that. So here and then finally the script runs. It finishes. We can see my table creation is complete for actual sales. right? And I can close that out. Actually, you don't really want to close that because it closes out the menu because you might have more to do, right? So that's actual sales. And then you would just go through all the different structures and do the same thing, right? Here's my forecast. It's completely empty. So nothing red there, right? But just another reminder, just to, I don't, if it's empty, obviously that tells you you're not loading that category. So there's really not much for you to do there. So, and then I just recreated those tables just to show you that it's not going to hurt anything to recreate those tables as if you perhaps make a mistake or whatever you recreate tables. Your bottom line is you're not going to do any harm here, so don't worry too much about it. But you want to make sure that you go through all the structures and create those tables to make sure that they are indeed created. Um, and you can always go into SQL Server, look for the tables. They'll show up within the database. If you go into Management Studio, you can always confirm that they're created there too. So, but rest assured they do get created. So, okay, so that's your data tables. That's basically for we've seen how to create the calendars for the view calendar and the import calendar. We've just gone through how to create the tables for each structure that you're loading, and we want to make sure that the new year for those tables are created, right? So that's been done. And then another thing we want to make sure is that we go into the Stratum connector, and this is a piece of software that basically creates the environment for the web interface. And we want to make sure that the Stratum connector is going to have those years selected that we just created. So if we go into the connector and we see that the measure groups area there, we want to make sure that we'll right click and edit that. And we want to go into each one of the structures that we're loading and make sure that the partitions are selected for the new years. And we can see that for actual sales, we've only got up to 25 selected, which is fine. If we built out the entire year, more years than we needed to, we don't necessarily have to select them yet, or you could. They will show up in the interface, but and the user might select it by chance. They might select 2027 out in the future, and guess what? They'll get no data. There's no data for actual sales in 2027, right? And they should know that. But, it does, if you do select them, they will show up in the interface as selectable. Just know that. Do you care? It's up to you. The bottom line is if you do select them out and save them, for instance, if I select these um, and save that away, um, I don't have to come here again next year. I don't have to come here for a few years, right? So that's good, right? I don't have to deal with it for a few years. So there's pros and cons to that, right? And you want to make sure that that you have something in your calendar telling you that this will eventually need to be maintained, right, down the road. So just keep that in mind. Right. So click on save. You'll save that away to make sure that those partitions have been selected and saved into your environment. And that's the connector piece of software that you want to make sure that all gets saved away as well. One other thing to consider is there's some programs that run on the iSeries or on SQL Server, depending on where what platform you're implemented on. But there are programs, for instance, I've got a batch program here called preprocess. If I go into that, we can see that there's these programs that run for my load OLAP and my create OMAST tables. So you want to make sure that review these because some of these might have a year. You might have years built out for some of this stuff. For instance, I could have something like this, and then have another line. So that's for sales. And then you might have another line for 2022 um, and 2023, right? Want to undo that line. And 2024, right? So you might see something like this. You want to make sure that you build a line for the new year. So, so you'll, and on the I series, this will be probably in a CL, somewhere in your load process, and you should see, these line of programs for your structures. So this one's just for sales, and you might have a few more for the different categories. If you don't see the year, like for instance, I've got open orders and inventory down here. If you don't see that year parameter, that means you're not using it. So you're okay. You don't necessarily have to maintain anything there. Okay. But if you do see something like this, for instance, for sales or any other larger category, it's typically done because you want to control what years are being processed, for these programs. So, but again, I would then want to add another line in here for 25, to make sure that I'm doing all the years for the programs there. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, again, this is something that we can do as a service for you. And so feel free to contact me. We also provide training. So if this is something that you feel like you're not confident or you don't know enough about, we can train you on and go into more detail, and I can provide additional further fundamentals so that you feel more comfortable about the application as well. Okay. So feel free to contact me um, if you're interested in getting some of that scheduled.